Dhamma. Test. Teruvan Saranai. We're about to make a start on the English sermon today, and I'm waiting for confirmation that you can hear me Teruvan Saranai via YouTube. So if one or two of our listeners could please drop a note onto the chat box to confirm this, that would be most helpful. Okay, thank you for that. We have confirmation. So let us proceed then. Okay, let's make a start. So as usual, we are all gathered wherever we may be right now. We are united through the facilities that we have available to us. Wherever you may be right now, let us remind ourselves that we are extremely fortunate to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching, which is the only path there is to deliverance, the only teaching that helps us to go over and above what we have forever accepted as being the norm, and to be able to witness and understand and comprehend that the path to deliverance, the path to true happiness, is through Nibbana. So on this occasion, being grateful, with gratitude in our hearts and in our minds, reflecting on the fact that we are extremely fortunate to be disciples of the Lord Buddha, the greatest teacher we have ever seen, and the greatest teacher that we will ever see. Let us all take a moment to affirm our allegiance to him as disciples who have taken refuge in the Noble Triple Gem. And in order to do that, let us all unite in reciting the Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa stanza to confirm and to affirm our allegiance to the Lord Buddha as his disciples. Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa Abhinna Khilassa Vijita Vijayassa Anighassa Susamachitassa Buddhasilassa Sadhupanyassa Vesantarassa Vimalassa Bhagavato Tassa Savakohamasmi. Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa Pabhinna Khilassa Vijita Vijayassa Anighassa Susamachitassa Buddhasilassa Sadhupanyassa Vesantarassa Vimalassa Bhagavato Tassa Savakohamasmi. Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa Pabhinna Khilassa Vijita Vijayassa Anighassa Susamachitassa Buddha Silassa Sadhu Panyassa Vesantarassa Vimalassa Bhagavato Tassa Savako Hamasmi Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Excuse me. Okay, so as usual, before we commence the sermon, let us all take a moment to observe the 5 precepts. So please remain upstanding, and in order to observe the precepts, reminding ourselves that this is a privilege rather than a right, that we have the support of the precepts which the Buddha gave us. So reminding ourselves of this, reflecting on the fact that there might have been instances throughout the week gone by where, having succumbed to desire, aversion and delusion, they might do the precepts that you observed. Do so. To recite the, or to take the refuge of the Noble Triple. Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Saranaгаmanang sampunnang padang samadhiyami Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami Suramera Tisaranena saddhing panchasilang dhammang sadhukam. Okay, you may now all be seated. Okay, and also before we commence, let us all take a moment to invite the devas, brahmas, spirits, demons and our ancestors, those who have predeceased us, but those who have always been by our sides, to help us and support us and assist us throughout this long journey that we have come through in samsara. They are now at Dhamma. Let us also invite them to join us and witness this meritorious deed as it unfolds. And in witnessing yourselves and rejoicing in that, they will be able to rejoice in the merits that can be. And for those beings who are already in the blissful plane, or who are able to be born in the blissful plane as a result of rejoicing in the merits, may they all be able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha. May they understand it, may they comprehend it, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So, with compassion, within your hearts and in your minds, let us now take a moment to invite all those divine beings in the 10,000 world systems to acquire merits and to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Dhammang Yasnsa Sunanto Sagga Mokkadam Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayam Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayam Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayam Bhadanta. Okay. And also before we commence, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves that although our lives have transformed as a result of the Dhamma touching our life, the journey that we have come through in samsara, without having had the Dhamma to save us, without having had the association of moral and noble people, and with virtually all our associations having been with ignoble, immoral people, innumerable will be the times we will have offended the noble triple gem as well as the noble ones. The consequences of such actions may be that today our progress in the Dhamma is hindered, despite the number of sermons that you keep listening to. It makes it difficult to understand what is being said and to comprehend the true teaching of the Dhamma, as well as various other obstacles that keep coming your way, both mental and physical, that keep you from achieving the noble states. So therefore, before we commence this sermon, let us all take a moment to gather up humility and humbleness, as this has to be done genuinely and authentically. So let us all take a moment to acknowledge that we have not always been the good and kind-hearted people we are today. Let us accept and acknowledge that we will oftentimes have offended, desecrated, reviled, and slandered the noble ones. Today we regret our actions, and with a solemn promise to ourselves that we will never again engage in such vile actions, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the noble triple gem, as well as the Samma Sambuddhas, the Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagamis, Sakrudagamis, Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana, the Buddha's ministry, for any words, thoughts, or actions of desecration, revile, and slander that we might have directed towards them. So let us all take a moment to seek their forgiveness. Okay, and let us also make a firm resolve that may, through the course of this sermon, if you have thus far been unable to achieve the noble state of Sotapanna, may you be able to do so. May the merits that you have acquired throughout samsara come to your rescue at this point in time. This is when you need it. No other time do you need the blessings of your merits than in a moment when you are listening to the Dhamma, to reflect on it, to contemplate on it, to keep your attention towards it without distractions. May those merits come to your rescue at this moment in time, and may they be able to help and support you to achieve your noble state of Sotapanna. And for those among you who have already achieved that noble state, may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages, and may we all be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So with that resolve in mind, I invite you all now to prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Okay. So I think for the third consecutive occasion, we are today streaming from the monastery premises, but without any of you actually in the presence of the Swami Wahanse. And as I reminded you last week, it is therefore imperative that you keep your focus. Do not allow distractions to come between you and the sermon, between you and what is being said. Technology is very good at distracting people. This is why, whether you're in front of me or whether you're not in front of me, I would urge you all to put your electronic devices to a side, be that your tablets, mobile phones, unless it is of course that you're using to listen to the sermon right now. So put away all your social media connections, interactions. I'm sure the world can keep going for 2 hours without you meddling with it. So switch off your television, unless again of course it's your TV you're looking at right now to listen to the sermon. So any other distractions that may obstruct you, may hinder you, let's put all that to a side. And of course, if there are also other individuals at home, hopefully they're all aware that you are listening to a sermon right now, and let us hope that they will not be needing to interrupt you for the next couple of hours or so. Because we need every little help that we can get. What we are trying to do is not something we've ever done before. What I mean by that is, had we achieved right view, right thoughts, right actions, right speech, all the way down to right concentration and liberation as the ultimate result, then none of us would be here right now either listening or preaching this sermon. So our presence here itself and our presence on this video indicates that we have not been successful thus far to do this, but chances are that was because the Dhamma was not available to us. However, on this occasion we can be assured that the Dhamma which enables us to achieve our salvation is laid out bare in front of us, and it makes perfect sense. There are those who are practicing the Dhamma, there are those who are reaping its results, its rewards, those who are able to attest to its authenticity, those who are able to attest to its potential, and so it gives us the confidence to keep going forward and achieve our liberation. And among them will be those among you, those of you who oftentimes at the end of sermons come and talk to us and share your experiences of how the Dhamma has transformed your life and the impact it has made on you, and what a positive change it has made in your lives. So hopefully the fact that the Dhamma works, you know for yourself, rather than because it is me who's saying it. So to just remind you, let's not allow any distractions to come between you and the sermon for the next very short time compared to considering the lifespan of a human being. So this is very valuable time. Let us make sure we use it wisely. Okay, so enough of that for now. Today, of course, is our meditation program, and we will do the best we can to conduct the meditation program as planned. So again, it will be a little bit unusual given that you're of course not at the monastery, and the layout may be a little bit different, but I would all urge you to engage with this as much as you possibly can. So hopefully you have a suitable environment at home today to do the meditation. I will conduct it in a way that is feasible and convenient to you. So we will be doing the meditations in, rather than doing them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so, the plan is to keep them time boxed for shorter periods of time. And that's partly because I'm not in your presence to, I suppose, check that you're doing what I have asked you to do. And secondly, you know what it's like when you start to meditate, a little while into your meditation, it's not meditation you're doing, although you look like doing it. You look like you're doing it. So you know what I mean. I will not spell it out just in case you get offended. You know, I'm very kind like that, right? So I won't spell it out, but you know what I mean. So rather than doing it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so, or an hour's session, as we would normally do at the monastery, we will keep it time boxed to between, say, 15 to 20 minutes or so at most. And if you have managed to go back and watch last week's sermon, which I did ask you to do, because last week we talked about ignorance and and it is ignorance that we need to spend, or this week at least we will be spending time during our contemplation sessions. Sometimes ignorance can be underrated in terms of that's exactly where we need to be attacking when we practice the Dhamma. Of course, we have heard the saying, Nahi silena vatang hotu pajjanti tathagata. So the Tathagata and Vahanse, or the Buddha, does not come into the world to preach to us a set of precepts. What he does come into this world is to teach us anicca, dukkha and anatta. So anicca, dukkha and anatta is simply knowledge. It is nothing else. It is the knowledge. It is knowledge once you bear it. Because for something to be knowledge, you need to be bearing it. If no one knows about something in this, no one in this universe knows about something, then it's not knowledge. But it will still be the truth. So last week we talked about this. I will go over last week's whiteboard session. I will start sharing that on screen in just a moment. So we will go through, we'll go over and quickly refresh what we talked about last week. We will recall the things that we talked about. And as I always like to and aim to, but most of the time I fail, I'm going to try and provide you with the opportunity this week to do more meditation than to listen to me talking, because after all, I can only show you the way as much as the Buddha can, but it is down to each and every one of us to practice, and practice is what makes us perfect. So we need to practice, and that practice is very focused and very I suppose you could say that your practice is on steroids when rather than you are listening to a voice which is probably coming over well, as it is right now, over an online stream. If you have understood what we are explaining to you, then you can be preaching to yourself, quite literally, that is what meditation is after all, or at least vipassana meditation, or the meditation of insight, which is preaching to yourself but silently. It is your mind that is doing all the talking, and that is what we'll be doing today. So without further ado then, let us go back and revisit what we talked about last week. We will go over the salient points, and then I'm again hoping that you have all been able to watch that video or the sermon from last week. I'm not actually going over it for the benefit of anyone who was not able to join us last week, and also for those who did, as a reminder. Okay, so let's do that now. I will start sharing my screen with you in just a moment. Please let me know when you're able to see it by dropping a message onto the chat box. Okay, nothing so far, I think. Please bear with me while I get the technology working. I'm still here, I'm just trying to get the whiteboard up, so please bear with me for a few moments. And if you do see it, then please drop a message into the chat window to confirm. That's not good. No. I'm sorry to keep you all waiting. I'm just trying to see if I, as I normally do, which is share just the just that application, which makes it more viewable on the stream. But failing that, what I will do is just share the entire screen, which is a good fallback option, but I'm just trying to see if I can get the application which I normally use to display the whiteboard on, which is how I normally do it. But for some reason today it's not showing up as usual. Here we go. Right. Okay, so you should be able to see the screen in a moment now. Please can you confirm? Okay, thank you. Right, so let's pick up where we left off then, which is a lot of gobbledygook. Where did we leave this off? Right. Okay, so this is the entire story that we discussed last week. And those who recall last week's sermon will remember some of the things we talked about. I think we started off with knowledge is not necessarily the truth. Okay, so knowledge is what we bear. This is the information that we have. The information that we have. And I'm hoping you can see me as I point at the screen. Yes, you can. Okay, excellent. So this is the knowledge is what we bear in our mind, and the truth may not necessarily be what we have in our knowledge. So we may know something, whether what we know is the truth or not is an entirely different matter. This is why sometimes when I speak to people, particularly those who come and visit us for the first time, I tell them, I'll be sincere with you, but don't take my sincerity as the truth. So whether what I'm saying is the truth or not has to be tested. It has to be verified against the truth. The truth can be verified against the truth. How else can the truth be verified? And the truth will normally be what you experience in the world, and also what you bear as the truth. So ultimately we need to have the ultimate source of the truth, and this is where the Buddha comes in. But when it actually becomes the truth for us is actually when we listen to what the Buddha had to say, we bore it, and then we put it into practice, and then we started to make sense of the world in ways that we couldn't until we got the teaching of the Buddha. And then our perspective changed. So this is what happens. So this is how the truth becomes what we know, and what we know is the truth. Okay, so we talked about this last week. So I'm gonna, this is a quick reminder, this is a whistle-stop tour of what we talked about last week, and before we get into the meditation sessions. So then we talked about the wrong belief set and the right belief set. The wrong belief set is that there is pleasure to be had in this world, joy to be had, and therefore this world can be considered to be essenseful. The problem with that is the moment that something is essenseful, the moment that something is pleasurable, then of course we want to go and experience that pleasure. You will remember from previous sermons, we've spoken about chocolate. When you brought home chocolate, you didn't bring it home to lock it up in a cupboard or put it in the fridge and then keep it there. The cupboard or the fridge is simply a temporary compartment for that item of food. It just holds it until you are ready to consume it. So the reason you bought it is not to put it in the cupboard. The reason you bought it is to eat it. And the reason you want to eat it is because, well, you like it, because you believe that it's pleasurable. Okay, so when you believe that something's pleasurable, now you want to experience it, and to experience the world you have to sense it, and this is where the senses come in. The sense of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and the sense of thought as well, which is the mind. So these 6 senses allow you to experience a world which you believe is pleasurable. So this believing what you think it is and what it is what we then moved on to, which is where we talked about a bottle of poison. So last week's sermon was titled The Poison Bottle. And just to remind you briefly what that was all about, you have a bottle which contains a liquid. Okay, so there's a bottle, it contains a liquid, and when there's a liquid in a bottle, and in the context of drinking it, you can only do 2 things, one of 2 things. You can either drink it or you can not drink it, as in you don't drink it. So you either drink it or you don't drink it. These are the 2 things that you can do in the context of drinking. Okay, so if you drink it, then it can have an effect on you. If you don't drink it, then it cannot have an effect on you, be that a good effect or a bad effect. It cannot have an effect on you if you don't really drink it. So for the contents of this bottle to have any effect on you, be that good or bad, okay, be that good or bad, for it to have any effect on you, first you have to drink it. If you don't drink it, then be that good or bad, it's not going to have any effect on you. So this is what we indicated with these arrows. It can have a good effect, which is the upward pointing arrow. It can have a bad effect, which is the downward pointing arrow. And there's a cross here to indicate it's not going to have either of these effects if you don't drink it. So it does not, whatever the potential is of this liquid, it cannot do anything to you if you don't drink it, which is pretty obvious. Now, then what we talked about was your drinking it or not drinking it is determined by a separate set of factors to the effect that it's going to have on you. So what did we mean by that? I'm reminding you this because this is what I want you to, this is what I really want you to think about today. Okay, so for the first session, for the first meditation session, I'll be asking you to go through this concept mentally. I want you to think about this, really think about this using plenty of examples from your own life. Okay, here I'm talking about a bottle which contains poison or some liquid. I want you to think about it in terms of your life experience, and I'll explain to you how to do that in just a moment. But let's get the concept straight and clear and straight in our heads first. So whether you drink it or not is not determined really by what is in the bottle. One could be thinking that doesn't make any sense. Of course, you're going to drink it or not depending on what's in the bottle. Actually, no, that's not the case. You drink it or you don't drink it, not because of what's in the bottle, but it's because of what you think is in the bottle. This is why sometimes someone, in the example as it is, it's a bottle that contains poison. So really the bottle has poison in it. What if you thought it was water? Would you not drink it now? So you see, the fact that it's poison in the bottle does not stop you from drinking it, because it's not what's in the bottle that determines whether you drink it or not. It's what you think it is that determines whether you're going to drink it or not. But the effect it's going to have on you is not determined by what you think it is. The effect it's going to have on you is determined by what it is. Okay, so you could almost, I think, which is what we did here, but as over the course of the last week, I have been thinking about this and simplifying this concept, because it did dawn on me that perhaps there were maybe one or two listeners to whom that just sounded like Greek, because it was my first attempt at getting the message across to you, this particular idea. So as we've been working it through last week, what I realized is you could actually tabulate this as I'm going to be doing it now. So see if you can follow this line of thought here, if my pen works. You know, when I used to be in the workplace, there was one thing I learned about technology, and that's what everything said about them. Everyone said about them. Technology, it works when you don't want it to. And conversely, technology never works when you want it to. So I used to work in IT, so whenever something went wrong in the bank, you know, we always got the stick for that. And this is what we always got told. Oh, you IT guys, never works when you want it. Right, there we go, finally. Right, so wasn't that pleasurable? Okay, right. So let's put that information into a table, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a way you can draw a table. Let's try it. One, two, three. This table is titled What I okay, so the first column is titled Think It Is. Oh no, sorry, it's what. Okay, so let's get rid of this. What I think it is the title of the first column. I think it is. In fact, just want to get us a little bit more room here. So here we have what I think it is. Okay, and the second column is what it is. The third column is what I do is. So what I do is, okay, so do is as in what I do with it is. And then finally what happens is. What happens is. Okay, so here are our 5 columns. 5, yeah, 1, 2, no, 3, 4 columns. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this. So we have what I think it is. I'll just draw the bottle here again. That's a bottle, by the way. Okay, so what I think it is, as in we're talking about the contents of this bottle. Okay, so what I think it is, as in what do I think the contents of the bottle are, is rather what it really is. So you could say what it really is. What I do is, so I put the I here. What I do is, as in what do I do with the contents of the bottle, and then what happens to me is after you have taken the contents of the bottle. I think that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so one last time. What I think it is as in what I think is the contents of the bottle. What it really is. What is it really? What I think and what is it really? So therefore, what do I do with it? what I do is with the contents of the bottle, and then finally what happens to me after I have done what I did with it is. Right, let's go through it and it will all start to make sense, right? So first and foremost, let's imagine that what it really is water. Okay, so what's really in the bottle is water. What I think is in the bottle is also water. So I think it's water, and it's really water. What would I do with it? I could drink it. Of course I would drink it. Now here I'm going to pose for a very quick question from all of you. It can see if you don't think about this, it can really catch you out. What I do with it is, okay, so this column number 3, this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3, and this is column number 4. My question to you now is, what I do with it is, okay, so drinking, is it determined by column 1 or column 2? So think about this before you answer. What I do with it, as in what do I do with the contents of this bottle, the fact that you're drinking it, is that determined by what is really in the bottle, or is it determined by what you think is in the bottle? I'll give you a short moment to think about it. Just repeat the question again. What you do with the contents of the bottle. On this occasion we are saying we're going to drink it. But is that determined by this, or was it determined by this? When I mean this or this, I mean, is it determined by what's really in the bottle, or is it determined by what you think is in the bottle? The fact that you're going to drink it? I think you agree with me that the answer to the question is 1, as in what I think it is, because you're going to drink it based on what you think it is, not what it really is. I will prove that in just a moment, that is actually the case. So what happens to you then? If you drink water, what's going to happen to you? Well, nothing. You're going to be just fine. Okay, so I'm going to put a smiley face here just to say nothing's wrong, everything's just fine. Now, second question then, what happens to me when you drink the contents of this bottle? Is that determined by column 1 or column 2? In other words, what happens to you when you drink that water? Is that determined by what you think it is or what it really is? So last week we talked about A and B and X and Y. So we were using variables and unknowns. So this is probably a more simplified way of putting this, which is why it has evolved over the last week. So last week we spoke about the same idea, but we used A's and B's and X and Y's. But today we're talking about it in this format, right? So question number 1 was, doing what you do with it, as in drink it, is that determined by what it really is or what you think it is? The answer we all came up with was, that's determined by what you think it is, right? So what you think it is going to determine what you do with it. However, what's going to happen to you when you drink it, is that determined by what you think it is, or is that determined by what it really is? Right? I think you'll agree with me then that the answer is this. So what you think it is has no bearing on what happens to you once you drink it. It's only what it really is that has a bearing, or it has everything to do with what happens to you when you drink it. Now let's continue this example and go to the second. So I'm going to skip a row here just to avoid the lines getting in the way. So ignore this one. Let's say this is poison. Okay, so it's no longer water, it's now poison. I'm only giving you this information. Which other box can you fill in this row? Which other box can you fill? Can you fill box 1? Can you fill box 3? Can you fill box 4? Or can you fill all of them, 2 of them, 1 of them, none of them? It's a multiple choice question. Ooh, those wretched multiple choice questions. Right? Okay, so poison's in the bottle. That's what it really is. Which one of these things can you answer now? Does it determine what you think it is? No, of course not, because that could be something entirely different. The fact that it's poison in the bottle, does that determine what you do with it? The tendency is for you to jump to the answer yes, but actually no, think about it. Look at what we talked about last time. You didn't drink it because of what was in the bottle. You drank it because what you thought was in the bottle. This sounds so simple, but if you're getting this, you're probably wondering why are you going on about this. It's obvious, but it's not, because there's a subtle difference here, and there's a very important point here. If these two things are not one and the same, you have all sorts of problems. That is what I'm trying to get to by using this example, right? The fact that there's poison in the bottle has no impact on number 3, because what you do with the contents of the bottle is not determined by what's really in it. Actually, that's determined by, well, right now we don't know, because this row is right now an unknown. But whether you drink it or not, what's going to happen to you when you drink it is determined by this. So actually, when I tell you it's poison, the only other box that you can fill in this row is box number 4. You can tell me that the moment you drink it, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to fall dead. You're going to be dead man if you drink if you drink poison. So now, but there's one thing that's keeping you from being dead, and that is you haven't drunk it yet. So you haven't drunk it yet. But is your drinking it or not drinking it determined by whether it's poison or not? No, that's determined by what you think it is. So now think about this carefully. What if you think it's water? Now you see where the problem is. You think it's water, but it's really poison. Because if it's water, you're going to go ahead and drink it, like you did in the previous occasion. Because it was water, you drank it. Again, because it's water, you're going to drink it. But on this occasion, it didn't really turn out to be water, it turned out to be poison. Therefore, what happened? Well, you didn't live to tell the tale. That's what happened. So you see, the point I'm trying to get across to you here, using this very simple example, is the danger when these two boxes are not one and the same. What I mean by that is what you think something is and what it really is. When these two things are not one and the same, then there's all sorts of problems. So because this is what ignorance is. Remember what we talked about earlier? Going back here. Ignorance was what? Here's ignorance. Ignorance is a wrong set of beliefs. Is a wrong belief set. In other words, it's when your knowledge does not reflect the truth. So in the example of the poison bottle, in the second row that we had, the contents of the bottle was poison, but your knowledge was not the truth because you thought it was water. Therefore, what you did was you drank it. And the moment you drank it, it's not what you thought it was that had the effect on you, it's what it really was. Okay? So I think, having gone through this now several times, it's pretty clear to you what I'm trying to get across to you. Okay? So hopefully that is all clear to you. And this is where I want to pause now for a brief moment, because I want you all to really put this into practice and really contemplate on this, because I don't, as I always say, the Buddhism is not, well, I suppose it is for some people, but for me it's not an academic study. This looks like an academic study. It's drawing charts and tables, and there's rows, arrows pointing from one to the other, and there's multiple choice questions. I mean, where did the Buddha talk about multiple choice questions, right? You could ask. This sounds very academic, but the reason I'm trying to get this across to you is because there is some theory behind it, but the real meat of it is when you start putting it into practice. Therefore, here's what I want you all to do now. We're going to pause here for a few moments. I'll keep this on screen if it helps you. This is only one example The example I have used here is that of a poison bottle to help get the idea across, the concept across to you. What I want you to do now is think about the poison bottles that you have consumed in your life. Think about the poison bottles that you have drunk in your life. Of course, you would not literally have drunk any, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this sermon right now. But there will be metaphorical poison bottles that you would have drunk. You didn't know it was poison, that's why you drank it, right? Had you known it was poison, would you have drunk it? Of course not, you wouldn't have. Because you're drinking it, right? See, going back to this table again, you're drinking it is not determined by what's in the bottle. It's not determined by, it has nothing to do with it. You're drinking it or not drinking it is determined by what you think it is. Now, I'll just put one last row into this table just to complete the picture. Let's say, okay, it's poison, and what you think it is also poison. Now, would you drink it? Of course you won't. You won't drink it. Therefore, what's going to happen to you? Nothing. You'll be just fine. See, now compare these two rows. Poison in the bottle, poison in the bottle. First you have a sad face or a dead face. Second you have a happy face. How can poison in a bottle give about a happy face? Well, I think you know the answer now, because happy face, sad face or dead face is not determined by what's in the bottle. It's determined by what you think is in the bottle. On this occasion, your knowledge was not the truth. This one, the third row, or the second row if you like. Here you thought it was water when it was really poison, but here it was poison and you knew it was poison. Therefore you didn't drink it, therefore it cannot have an effect on you. I mean, this is the Dhamma all over. Okay? How? Well, let me show you. This here is dukkha, suffering or wanting. This is suffering. I mean, how else? What better way to put across suffering than a dead face, right? So this is suffering. Suffering is caused by attachment, that we know. Suffering is caused by attachment, we know that. Attachment is drinking. So drinking the contents of the bottle is what causes this man to be dead. However, you drink it because you don't know what it is, right? So of course it's this which is attachment, which causes suffering, but that attachment is not driven by what it really is, which is this. It's determined by what you think it is. So what it really is, so if you just abstract this example from what we're talking about here in terms of suffering and the Buddha's teaching, this being suffering, which is what happens to you, you're suffering, what you do with it is attached. This is why I have put the little letter A here. What it really is. Now you should know, you should start to think about what do you think I'm talking about here? What it really is. What it really is. That's Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, and their true nature. Their true nature being vexatious, sufferable, and essenceless. This is their true nature. This is what it really is. This is what it really is. Okay, this is what it really is. However, what we think it is, about what? Again, Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. What we think it is pleasurable, joyful, and essenceless. Now tell me, did we attach because it was vexatious, or did we attach because it was pleasurable? The answer is simple. We attached because it was pleasurable. But what happened to us? What happened to us? Was that because it was pleasurable, or was that because it was vexatious? What happened to us, which meaning suffering. The suffering that we are experiencing now, is that because we thought it was pleasurable, or is that because it was really vexatious? So you see, this column determines this column, but this column determines this column. See, would it not be great if this column determined this column and this column determined this column? In other words, what you thought it was determines what's going to happen to you. What it really is going to determine what you're going to do with it. See, if that were the case, utopia, if that were the case, then none of us would be suffering. Because the moment you think something's pleasurable, like out of magic, it just becomes pleasurable. But it doesn't work like that. So ignorance is where these two columns are not one and the same. That is simply what ignorance is. I mean, I don't know how I could make it any simpler. If someone asks you what's ignorance, it's when you're going to drink a bottle of poison and you don't know it's poison. That's how simple it is. That is what ignorance is. Either worldly ignorance or supramundane ignorance, right, which is lokottara and laukika and so on, right? Ultimately, when something's vexatious, sufferable and essenceless, which is the nature of everything there is in this world, everything in existence, because all things are conditioned, remember? Conditioned things by nature arise and pass away. To our liking or no. Cause and effect drives that. Right, so cause and effect drives that. Nothing to do with that, our liking, nothing to do with attachment. So why do we attach? Because we like to think that it's to our liking, we like to think that it's a source of pleasure, it's a source of joy, and therefore it's essence-full. So this determines this, as in column A, column 1 drives column 3, however column 2 drives column 4. And when 1 and 2 are unequal, now you have a problem, because if you don't know that the world is vexatious and you think it's pleasurable, then what you do is you attach to all worldly things, and that leads to suffering. Okay, so what I want you to do now then, enough of me talking, this is a meditation session, I need to remind myself. I'll leave this on screen. What I want you to do is think about the metaphorical poison bottles that you have all had to consume in life, and ask yourself, why did you do it? Why did you do it? Was it because you knew it was poison? In fact, was it because it was poison, and or was it because so simply what was it because it was poison, or was it because you didn't know it was poison? Go through a few examples in your life. I want you to really understand and really see through this and identify that ignorance is the culprit here. Ignorance is where we need to focus our attack. That's who we have a battle with. This is our enemy, ignorance. Ignorance is simply where 1 and 2 are not the same. I mean columns 1 and 2, of course 1 and 2 are not the same. But columns 1 and 2, when those things are not the same, then that's where all hell breaks loose. Okay? So I think that's all clear to you. I'm just quickly going to jump to our chat to make sure everyone's still there. Okay, excellent. So what I want you to do now then is, I want you to go through life. Whose life? Your life. Go through your life, pick some examples up. Metaphorical poison bottles. The bottles that you drank so happily, so gladly, so gleefully, and then what happened to you? And then ask yourself, the suffering that came into my life, was that determined by what was really in the bottle, or was that determined by what I thought was in the metaphorical bottle? Okay, so off you go then. Let's all take a moment. I will let you know when it's time to break and find somewhere comfortable to either sit down, or you can do your walking meditation. The only meditation I'll ask you not to do is your sleeping meditation. Any other meditation is fine, so please don't go into the sleeping posture because you won't wake up. Standing meditation, sitting meditation, they're both fine. Just make yourself comfortable, right? If you have to put your legs up, I don't care, it's fine. Just make yourself comfortable. But if there are others with you or around you, then just please make sure that you don't distract them, don't disturb them, and they'll want to do this just as much as you do. So when I say let's start our meditation, that's not a cue for you to, okay, let's just go and watch some telly while Swami Mahanse says, okay, can you all come back out of your meditation now? Please don't do that, because that would simply be a waste of time. Okay, so let's. I'm sure you won't be doing that, and please don't pick up that mobile phone. Okay, that is the poison bottle after all. So put that poison phone, put that poison bottle to a side, and let's do what we're here to do now. Okay, so let's dig deep into our lives. Get a few examples up. Metaphorical poison bottles there will be. These are the things whose consumption led you to suffering. I want you to ask the question, did I drink it because it was poison, or did I drink it because I thought it wasn't poison? I thought it was something else. Right? And then you can also extend that into Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, how it's vexatious, sufferable and essenceless. This is what it really is. But pleasurable, joyful and essential, that's what you thought it was. And that's what led you to drink it. And then that drinking led you to suffering, because ultimately what was really in it was vexatious, but you thought it was pleasurable. What was really in it was sufferable, but you thought it was joyful. What was really in it was essenceless, but you thought it was essence-full. So thereby you will begin to realize how much of a problem, in fact all world's problems, is down to not knowing what it really is. When 1 and 2 don't equal each other, that's when all of world's problems come into existence. So you don't need another, you don't need a symposium for that. This is the simplest truth. You don't need all, nations of the world coming together. Let's try and see why problems have come into being. Problems have come into being because you don't know how the world really is. Simple as that. That's ignorance. Okay, so let's take some more time and let's go into our meditation, and I'll let you know when we are ready to continue the sermon. Okay, so please get seated or standing, in whatever position you're comfortable, and let's all put some time into our meditation. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. May I and all beings always be healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. May I and all beings always be healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Bliss of Nirvana. Healed by the ultimate bliss of. Okay. So, hopefully, you have all managed to dig into your lives which are rich in experience, and have managed to find some metaphorical poison bottles. So these will be poison bottles which you drank not knowing that it was poison, but not knowing about it didn't keep you from being poisoned. Because really not knowing or knowing has nothing to do with what's going to happen to you. It's ultimately what it really is that has that impact, or that bearing on you. What it's going to do to you is determined by that. But whether you actually consume it or not is determined by what you think it is. Now, among these examples that you would have thought about, reflected on, hopefully you will have all sorts of things, depending on what life experiences you have had, what age you are, whether you're a man or woman, whether you're which part of the world you were in, what age you are, and so on and so forth, whether you've been married or not, whether you've had children or not, right? Depending on these things, your experiences will be different. But however, if you have ever suffered, then the science of suffering is this. So what we have talked about here is the science of suffering. And it's great that science can be, or rather suffering can be presented as a science, because when it's a science, science always leaves out the person. Science that has nothing to do with individuals. It's free of individualism. It does not work or act in a certain way based on who you are. It's determined by what you do, or rather what the factors are. It's causes which determine an effect, and this is science. Okay, so this is the science of suffering, and you can see the science of suffering and the science of happiness in this poison bottle example that we have talked about. And no matter what those experiences are in your life, whether it's to do with sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch. So for instance, if say you wanted to look at something, and something that you thought was beautiful, now see, the fact that I have to say the word, I have to include the word you thought was beautiful. The moment I include that word in a statement, you must be able to identify that there are inherent risks there. Because what if what you think is not what it really is? That can always be the case, right? Whenever you say, hey, what do you think? Is it going to rain today? What do you think? Whenever you include the word think, in any statement, you need to understand that there's an inherent risk there, because you will act based on what you think, but what's going to happen to you is not based on what you think. What's going to happen to you is based on what's really going to happen, or what it really is. So if you wanted to watch something, if you want to look at something, then the reason that you attached yourself to that sight was because you thought that it was pleasurable. That's why you attached to it. That's why you wanted to look at it. You know, all wantings are created by not knowing what it really is. All wantings are created by not knowing what it really is. See, in fact, you can actually tell a story using this table. You can tell a story here. See, what really came into the world first is number 2. So what it really is, that came first. I mean, you know, of course, it was always ignorance first, but without going there, I'm not talking about that particular thing. I'm talking about suffering, the story of suffering. So, like, once upon a time, there was number 2. You know, by number 2, I don't, oh God, I don't mean that number 2. I mean number 2 in this column. Okay. So once upon a time, there was the number 2 in the column, and then number 1 happened. So what you thought it was not what it really was. Then what happened was you did something, which was drink it, and as a result of that, number 4 happened. So you see that story, if you were to relate that story, the story of suffering, you would go 2, 1, 3, 4. Right? 2 was what was really there first to begin with, as in the world was there. It was just there. But everything in the world was vexatious, sufferable, and essenceless. Then we came along. We just didn't know how things were. Then what we did was we attached ourselves to it. Sorry, we were ignorant about what was really out there, and that ignorance led us to attach ourselves to the world. Now what happened was suffering happened. Suffering happened. Why? Because it was not determined by what you thought it was. Okay, so we've talked about this now. Now, whether that's, you know, as I said, in your life examples, life experiences, you will have gone through sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. I mean, this is what we experience in life. Okay, the things that you attach to. If you just look around your home, you know, I mean, in some senses, I suppose that's convenient right now, because I can say look around your home, and you can actually literally do it. If home is where you are, as you listen to the sermon, just look around your home and see some of the things you have there. Okay, from the ornaments to the carpets, to your sofa, to your television set, to your showcase, you know, to your cabinets, and to every little thing you have at home. There's a story behind it, right? All of them came to your home. All of them came into your home because they have a story to tell. Or there's a story to tell as to how they came into your home. We've talked about this in the past. I think in one of the meditation programs I asked you to take me home with you. A lot of you were reluctant, but ultimately we went home, and then I said, well, you know, take me around your home into the various rooms you have in your home, and talk and show me around and tell me about all the things you have at home. That's when some of you started going red. Because you had to explain to me why you have that particular ornament. You had to explain to me why your carpets were a certain color. You had to explain to me why you have curtains that are matching with the color of your sofa. You had to explain to me why you have an aquarium at home. You had to explain to me why you have a waterfall at home, and a mural, and a painting. You know, you had to explain all of these things to me, knowing that I know that all of these came to your home to relieve you from vexation, relieve you from this mental suffering. But why that mental suffering? Well, the story there is here. 2 came first, then came 1, then came 3, then came 4. Because all those things were there. But what happened was, they were vexatious, they were sufferable, they were essenceless. If you attached to them, the only thing it would bring you was suffering. See, I mean, Do we not see that now in action? Isn't that what's happened? Isn't that what's happened? We've stopped at suffering. Number 4 is suffering here. So it was vexatious, it was sufferable to begin with. We are vexing here. It was vexatious to begin with. But then we thought it was pleasurable, joyful, essenseful. Then what happened? You attached to it. Now you ended up suffering. So where do we go from here? See, when you begin to understand that this is where we went wrong every single time, not knowing how it really is. You know there's a single word for that, and that word is ignorance. That word is ignorance. Ignorance is the biggest culprit here. We have said in the past, expectation is the biggest culprit. Expectation is ultimately this suffering. This is number 4. That is expectation. But now what we are doing is we are going deep down into what is expectation rooted in. We've done this in the past. I'm just expressing this in a different way to help you understand by using a very simple example like a bottle of poison. Okay, so you will begin to understand that ignorance is the problem here. So you see, where does ignorance lie? Rephrasing that question, my question to you is, if you're suffering now, where is the ignorance which is causing that suffering? Let's say you're suffering now because someone said something to you and it hurt your feelings. So that's where you're suffering. Okay, so if you're suffering now and you're now able to see the story behind suffering, suffering was because of attachment. Attachment was because you attached to something that was a certain way when you thought it was another way. So whose fault is that now then? Is the fault in it being the way it is, or is the fault in you thinking it's another way to what it really is? So you're immediately able to see that ignorance is what caused all this suffering, because ignorance is what led to attachment, right? So if you are suffering because someone said something to you, someone said something you didn't like, clearly there's ignorance there. Whose ignorance is that then? Is it that person's ignorance, or is it your ignorance? So what grudges do we have with somebody else then? When I and I alone, or the ignorance in my mind alone, is responsible for my suffering. We've spoken about this in the past. We are the architects of our own suffering. See, here's the architectural drawing for suffering. 2, 1, 3, 4. First it was the way it was really. First it was. I mean, that's it. It was. Right? It was just the way it really was. Then you thought it was another way to what it really was. Then you went and did something you shouldn't have done, you oughtn't to have done, and you wouldn't have done had you known how it really was. Then what happened? You started to suffer. So the problem is not how it really is, the problem is how you think it is. So that being the case then, do you think it's about time then that we go and change the way it really is of everything there is in the world? Hey, how about that, eh? Let's go around the world, let's travel the world. Actually, no, you can't travel these days, I just forgot that. When they allow us to do it, ultimately, one day, let's go around the world and change the way things really are. Okay, because they're all vexatious and sufferable and essenceless, these wretched things. Why don't we change them all to be pleasurable, joyful, and essential? I mean, come on, there can't be that many things in this world that we ought to change, right? There's only 8 billion people. Well, there won't be that many by the end of this. And there aren't, well, there's only probably several trillion items, things in this world. So we just need to go and change all of them. From pleasurable, joyful, essenceless, or rather vexatious, sufferable, essenceless, to pleasurable, joyful, and essential. How about we do that? Or how about we just do something that's more meaningful? How about we change the way we think about them? How about we see things as they really are? So this is ultimately what we need to do. Just remove the sticker. Change the label. Replace the label. This bottle had a label on it and it said water. We only drank it because there was a label on it that said water. The label is not necessarily an indicator of what's in the bottle. I mean, someone could have put the wrong label. Isn't that what happened after all? Someone put the wrong label. Who's that someone? This is the Asat Purushas, ignoble people that we came across. They helped us put wrong labels on things. They were mislabeled. So what we need to do now is simply not empty the bottles, just replace the label. Take off the label that says water and stick a label back that says poison. Poison caused no one any harm. No, seriously, poison didn't cause anyone any harm. If you go to an alchemist, or if you go to some a pharmacy, or if you go to a place where they sell you agricultural products, there'll be lots of bottles of poison there. And if you drink it, it's going to cause you harm, but for as long as you don't drink it, it's not going to cause anybody any harm. So poison doesn't cause anyone any harm. In fact, poison is not poisonous. Poison becomes poisonous when you drink it. And you drink it when you don't know what it really is. So for the next part of our meditation session, which we're going to be doing it in the next couple of minutes, what I want you all to do now is, as I said, we went through life and we dug up some examples in our life with these metaphorical poison bottles. What I want you to do now is really examine the outside of the bottle, and you will see on there there's a sticker. It says safe for human consumption. It says this is water. It will say this is orange juice. It will say this is Faluda. It will say this is a lovely drink. It will say this is a nice, lovely beverage. But you know now that is where everything went wrong. What I want you to do now then is go back again into those specific examples and do what you should have done long time ago. So this is well overdue, but better rather late than never. So what we need to do then is go back to those metaphorical bottles, take out those labels, one by one at a time. Take out that label that says water, safe to drink, take off that label and put on a proper label, a label that actually tells you what it really is. And again, this is because you know now what's happened. You are poisoned. So this is not because I'm saying so, hopefully. This is because you can now see what's going on here. You can see the signs of suffering. And you can also then see the signs of happiness. These happy faces. See again, here's a happy face. That's because 1 equals 2. Here's another happy face. Why? Because 1 equals 2. You get a sad face or a dead face when 1 does not equal 2. There's the one exception where you think it's poison but it's water. That's the only exception. Okay, so you think it's poison but actually it's water. So it's actually safe to drink, but you think it's poison so you don't drink it. That's the only exception, but the thing is, there isn't anything like that in this world. This world is full of vexatious, sufferable and essenceless things. Why so? Because they're all conditioned. And conditions determine its lifespan. When the conditions are in order, then the effects will manifest themselves. When the conditions cease to exist, then of course the effects will cease to exist. So it is not determined by your likings, your wishes, your wantings, your whims and your fancies. So therefore it's time to put a stop to all this nonsense. This is all nonsense. The word nonsense, it carries a lot of meaning there. When you're talking sense, someone says you're talking sense because you're actually saying what it really is. When you're saying nonsense, that's when what you're saying is not what it really is. So that is this is nonsense. It doesn't make sense what you're saying. Why does it not make sense? Because it's not what's really going on. You're talking gibberish, you're talking something else. It's not what it really is. Right? So what we need to do now is go back into your shelves where you will have all those bottles, your metaphorical poison bottles, knowing and understanding and comprehending, having comprehended fully through insight that really what was in those bottles was poison after all. All we need to do now is just take the label off. Take the label off. Take that old label off which says water safe to drink. Take that label off and put a big sticker that says poison. See, and when you do this, there's no reason for you to do this with a long face. Because what you know now, that what you're doing is only going to save you from pain and suffering and trouble, right? You should know that. Because why did we suffer all this time? It's because we didn't have the right label on it. So now that you're going to put the right label on it, do you think you're going to suffer now because of the contents of that particular bottle? See, if you didn't drink it, nothing would have happened to you. That's where we started this conversation. Only drinking has an impact on you. Unfortunately, there are no good effects to be had, because there is no such thing in this world that is actually going to bring you any sort of good. If you attach, after all, you can only attach or you not attach. These are the two things you can do. So drinking and not drinking, I mean, this is a metaphor for that. Drinking is attachment, not drinking is not attaching. There's not a third thing you can do. There are only two things you can do mentally. You can either attach or not attach. If you attach, there are no good things that can happen. So I might as well cross this one out. There are no good things that can happen. There are no good things that can happen. There's only the bad stuff. So if you don't like the bad stuff, then you shouldn't drink it. In other words, if you don't like suffering, then you shouldn't attach. This is the only thing you can do. But remember, it's not a sacrifice you're making. You know, some people think it's it's about making sacrifices. You know, we need to sacrifice so that we can be happy later. That's not what Buddhism is about. I think that's Stoicism, or Stoicism, if I remember correctly, where it was the philosophy there was, strive on and sacrifice your happiness for later good. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but Buddhism is not that. It's not about making a sacrifice now, when actually, the reason I'm saying that is, when you understand that what you're letting go is something that caused you suffering, how is that a sacrifice? How is that a sacrifice? A sacrifice is when you're actually letting go of something that only does good to you. You are letting go of that to gain something better, I suppose. Okay, so that's what a sacrifice is. I mean, they talk about sacrifices in relationships, right? To have a happy marriage, you need to sacrifice, right? Both parties have to sacrifice. In other words, what they're saying is, you've got to be willing to watch less television if you want to have a happy married life, or you've got to be willing to watch romance, romantic, soaps and these romantic films if you want to have a happy married life. Either way, this way or that way. So this is a sacrifice. If you don't like to do something, but you have to do it for something better, then that's a sacrifice. But with Buddhist philosophy, nothing you're letting go is actually something that brings you happiness. Everything you're letting go is something that has only ever brought you suffering. I don't see how Buddhism is about sacrifice. Buddhism is not about sacrifice. It's about letting go of the stuff that causes you suffering. How is that a sacrifice? You're letting go of stuff that causes you suffering. I mean, to me, that's the only thing that makes sense to do. Sacrifice is when actually you're attaching yourself to things when it's going to cause you suffering. That's what making a sacrifice is, right? So there are no sacrifices here. So really, there are only things that can cause you suffering. Therefore, you're willing to let go without anyone even having to ask you. You don't need to be requested. You don't need to be asked. You don't need to be pleaded to let go, because letting go, you're only letting go of things that cause you suffering. Right? So what we're going to do now then is, before we conclude, so we need to go back and change those labels. So we've seen those bottles now. You open the cupboard, you can now see all those bottles. What we're going to do is we're going to try and change the labels on some of those bottles at least. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of them, just to get some practice. Okay, and then once you have finished this session, in your 15-minute sessions, which I know you're all doing, what you will be doing is I'd like you all to contemplate on this aspect throughout the next week, which is walking up to your cupboards, opening it up, looking at your metaphorical poison bottles, and instead of emptying the bottle, I don't want you to empty the bottle, just keep it, it's fine. Remember, poison caused nobody any harm. Poison does not cause anyone any harm. It's drinking it that causes you harm, and you only drink it when you don't know what's in it, unless of course you want to suicide. I'm not talking to people who want to suicide. I'm talking to people who are intelligent. Okay, so let's go to our cupboards, open them up, and in there you will find those bottles, and on all of them it will say water, safe to drink, orange juice, safe to drink, apple juice, safe to drink, grape juice, right, safe to drink, have some. Okay, and give some to your children, it will say. But you know now that that was all a lie. Look at what's happened to you. Look at what's happened to you. This is all because of you've been drinking all this stuff. So what we need to do now is take out all those labels and replace them with the right labels. Not empty the bottle, just put the right label on it. So what we're not trying to do is get rid of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. We don't need to do that. All we need to do is just put the right label on it. Emptying the bottle is like getting rid of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. That's not what we're about. We're just seeing things as they really are. That's all we need to do, because when there's light, there's no more darkness. That's all we need to do. Okay? So let's go back, walk up to those cupboards, open the cupboards up, each of those bottles, or as many of them as you can, remove the safe to drink, this is water label, and stick the proper label on it, that this is poison. So that's the metaphor. What do I mean by in real terms? Each of those things that you would have looked at, considered, reflected on, they were objects which ultimately brought you suffering. By objects, I don't mean physical objects, I mean things that brought you suffering because of attachment. And you attached because you read the wrong label. So what we need to do now is take out the old label. The old label says pleasurable, joyful, and essential. As in, pleasures to be had, please drink me. That's what it said. Joy can be had by drinking me. Please drink me. Please go ahead and drink me. This is so good for you. Please go ahead and drink me. Now we've got to take out those stickers and put the right sticker on it, which will say vexatious, do not drink. Sufferable, do not drink. This is not any good for you. This is no good for you. Do not drink. Let's put those stickers on there, and then we can close the cupboard. Because next time you walk up to the cupboard and open the cupboard up, you will then be able to see the right labels on it, and you wouldn't even touch those bottles because you know exactly what's in there now. Okay, so let's take a few more minutes and walk back up to our metaphorical poison cupboards and put our metaphorical stickers onto our metaphorical poison bottles. That's a lot of metaphors. Alright, okay, so if everyone's ready then, let's spend a few more minutes going back and continuing our meditation from where we stopped. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed in the ultimate bliss of nirvana. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed with the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of nirvana. Okay. I hope you've had some success doing that. I'll tell you why I'm really keen on this approach. It's because in my experience, this is something that really works for me. When I actually go back and check what is the root of some of the vexations that keep bothering me, it has become pretty obvious to me that it's not the way that the world is that causes us any grief, any problems, or any sleepless nights. The only problem, the sole problem, is that what I think about this world, the way I see it, when it is not congruent with how it really is, when there's a mismatch, when there's a disparity between what I think the world is and what it really is, that is when everything, all hell breaks loose. I have only suffered ever in my life because I didn't know the way the world was. I didn't know things the way it was. That is the only reason I suffered any time in my life. And I think you will begin to recognize through this contemplation, through this reflection, that all of your sufferings are rooted in ignorance. I like that it is such, because ignorance is, I suppose, I'd like to think, is easier to fix than having to reassemble every part of my physical being, my physical body. Perhaps if, let's say, the reason I'm suffering is because my head is fixed to my neck the way it is, and it really ought to be fixed the other way around, that would involve a lot of work and very painful, and also it will require me to go and seek someone else's help. So I'll be once again I'll be dependent on someone else. I'll be reliant on someone else to fix things for me. Whereas the Buddha's teaching is all about empowering. It's about putting you in the driver's seat. It's about putting you in the pilot seat. No one else can any longer. Once you have the seed of the Dhamma, once you have understood the Dhamma, no one else do you need in your life or on your path, in your practice. It's not essential to have somebody, because the Dhamma is there to guide you, and you are now in the pilot seat, you are now in the driver's seat. From that point forward, what you need to do is to continue to contemplate. And this is why when the Buddha was asked, I shall remind you on this occasion, we have spoken about this many times before, but I will remind you again, when the Buddha was asked, Venerable Sir, what is the simplest way that one could become a Sotapanna? What is the simplest way then that a Sotapanna can go on to become a Sakrodagami? What is the simplest way, what is the quickest way, the fastest way that one could go on from being a Sakrodagami to an Anagami? And then what does one have to do to become an Arhat? And then also what does one have to do after he or she has become an Arhat? On each occasion, the Buddha replies, contemplate on anicca, dukkha, anatta. In other words, what he's saying is, contemplate on the truth as it is. Because when the light of the truth appears, the darkness of ignorance disappears. You need to do nothing else. And what I'm trying to show you here is through empirical evidence that you need not do anything. I'm using the poison bottle example here, that metaphor here, to prove that point to you, that you need not do anything. Remember, you did not drink it, or you drank it not because it was poison or otherwise. You drank it because you thought it was safe to drink. Again, that's ignorance. I'm proving to you, hopefully, this is making sense to you now, that the only thing you really need to do in the Buddha's dispensation is to work on your ignorance. And if ignorance is darkness, then to rid darkness, you can't do that by adding more darkness to it. The only cure, the only remedy for darkness is light. You don't need anything else. Once you have shone light into a dark place, you then have nothing else to do to take the darkness out. The more light there is, the less darkness there is. You don't need to bring light and then take the darkness away. So that is not something that I came up with. The Buddha, in his own words, has expressed that. When the light of wisdom prevails, the darkness of ignorance disappears. So see how simple he's making this for us. Why do we then go on and complicate things? Isn't samsara complicated enough? To then go on and to complicate the one thing that allows us to uncomplicate things? How, what happens when you complicate that also? Because we are habitually, we like to think about things, we like to reflect on things, and we like to always analyze things. Habitually humans are like that, because we are gifted / cursed with the power of an analytical mind. So we always like to analyze things, and sometimes it goes beyond what is for our own good. Because analyzing is fine as long as it's for the purpose of your liberation. When you start to analyze for other purposes, for purposes beyond your liberation, for purposes beyond your true happiness, now every analysis you do puts you into the box of suffering, and the more you keep doing it, it's going to lock you up in there. So this is why, going back to what I said right at the start of the sermon, this is not for an academic study. So this is, I know you see a table on there, you're seeing some charts, some flow charts, right? There are boxes and arrows pointing left, right, center, and all over the place, A's and B's and unknowns and X's and Y's. I really, really, really don't want you to take this as being an academic. This is not a course on Buddhism. This is not a course on Nibbana. Okay, I don't mind you taking down notes, but what I'm not expecting you to do is then take down the notes and then go and make some short notes and then, study your short notes. Again, it's fine to have some notes, but remember, these notes, these aids, please don't think of them as study aids. That's not what these are. I have no interest in trying to expound the Dhamma to you, to make this an academic research paper, or to become a doctor. This is not for a doctorate in Buddhism. We are not about that, because we are exclusively for aspirants of Nibbana. So what we are here to do is to help you on your path to Nibbana. This is purely for the purpose of breaking things down, helping you make sense of these concepts in your mind, which are not difficult concepts.